Good evening, Lincoln County community members, and thank you for joining us this evening for the next series of our Lincoln County Wildfire Readiness presentations. This evening, we will be focusing on Module 5, Sheltering with the American Red Cross, and for those medically fragile persons. These presentations are grouped into 6 separate modules and are virtual. Previously to 2021, we had one presentation that encompassed a 2-hour presentation that we did in person with you. But due to continuing COVID conditions, we have opted to split the 2-hour presentation into 6 individual modules. This allows us to provide additional time for the different components, such as tonight, talking about sheltering. It also allows us to live stream, so you can watch it at home or anywhere that you're at. Allows us an opportunity to still engage with our public or community by attending as an attendee so that you can ask questions. And it also allows us to record these sessions and place them on the county website so that you're able to watch them at any time that you would like to. If you are one of our attendees this evening and you have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat box and we'll monitor those as we go. And at the end of the presentation, we will have plenty of time to answer any questions. If you happen to be watching on the live stream or from home at a later time, you can email any of the presenters tonight at their email, which is provided on the last slide, and then we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. Also, with this presentation, if you happen to be reviewing the slides that are on our website, you can click on any of the graphics links here, and they will actually take you to additional information that is referenced on that slide. So for this evening, our guests are Michael Johnson from the American Red Cross that will be starting us off after we watch our Lincoln County 2021 public service announcement. This is a public service announcement about this year's wildfire season and readiness, featuring your Lincoln County Fire Defense Board, Chief Robert Murphy from Newport Fire, Chief Rob Dahlman from North Lincoln Fire, and Lincoln County Sheriff Curtis Landers.
If you want to know why you're so tired so often, look at this banana. It's fresh, brightly colored, looks great.
Sorry about that. Let me get the right YouTube over on the screen. Here we go.
Wildfire can and does happen here, and we all need to prepare for it. And that's probably the biggest thing to the public is be aware. Be aware, be prepared, know what happens around you, know what happens in the community. Listen to local radio, local media, sign up for Lincoln Alerts so that you have the most time, the best chance of getting early notification if we need to evacuate. I think something the general public, unless they've been through this, never really fully appreciates is how fast it spreads and how it can go from nothing to a firefighter or a sheriff's deputy knocking on your door saying, "Get out now." Sometimes, while we have a great system and we have the ready, set, go, sometimes it goes straight to go. I mean, that's just the reality because of how fast these fires spread. And so the time to start thinking about what do I do in a wildfire isn't when somebody's knocking on your door. That's probably the biggest lesson, I think. The time to start thinking about it, to start planning with your family, to know what you're going to do is really now. And that's why we're doing these messages, because we want people to think about this now, because in August, in September, you should already know what you're going to do.
Yeah, Lincoln Alert should be very much a priority in what they're preparing for their plans. It's a direct communication. We heard a lot of things. Communication wasn't good or wasn't acceptable during this last event. And we know that Lincoln Alerts is one of the things that continued to work and was providing information, timely information, to all the residents in the area. And one of the things that residents can do is make sure that their Lincoln Alerts is up to date, that they have their phone numbers in properly, that their cell phones are in there. If you want to know about a neighbor or family member around, you can put their address in, and there's lots of tools and things you can do to be alerted in the event of not just a wildfire, but any event, any emergency event that goes on. It's an excellent tool, and that's one of the first priorities citizens should do is have that all up to date.
So your personal preparedness is have a plan of what to do if you have to evacuate. And this can be applied not just to fire season, but also if we have other natural disasters that come on. Pay attention to what's going on, know when those alerts come out, be part of and subscribe to the Lincoln Alert system, and make sure that you have, if you were to walk into your house and say, I've got 5 minutes to grab my most essential items, what would I take? What would be important? If you're at a level 1 or a level 2 evacuation for a wildland fire, have those things already gathered up and in your car. Have your birth certificates, your important documents, your computers, anything that you say, I can't live without this. Have that stuff at the door ready to go or in your car ready to go.
I'm just really proud to be part of this community and part of the response that goes into it between the county, between the cities, the different fire districts. It goes all hand in hand, and it's a very collaborative approach to these disasters. And it's also because of, we're prepared well. Jenny Demaris, our county emergency manager, prepares us every year, prepares the community as we're doing here with information, but it's working together. That's the only way that we'll succeed, and we do very well at it.
Visit Lincoln County's website to view the 2021 Wildfire Readiness Presentation Schedule. These are live events that you can attend via Zoom and ask questions, or you can watch them live streamed on YouTube. There are 6 subject matter areas and 1 event per each fire district. So if you can't make it in person, rest assured we will archive these online for you to review. When you get to the website, just use the search tool or look for the text that says Wildfire Readiness Presentations. Thank you.
Okay, we are back, and that was a great public service announcement that we've done for the first time with those collective agencies, and we hope to continue this each year. And as our new season, such as winter, we'll have a new public service announcement then. Okay, so to get us started off with our presentations this evening, Michael Johnson is going to talk to us about the American Red Cross, and then I will be speaking specifically about the medical fragile persons and sheltering with them when you have to evacuate. So our overview tonight, we have just a little administrative brief to talk about our sponsors and why we're providing these presentations. The American Red Cross, sheltering with them, and then sheltering with medically fragile persons. Additional resources that will help you in your planning efforts, and then plenty of time for any questions that you may have. So for our administrative brief and sponsors, most emergencies start with a call to our 911 dispatch centers, our PSAP units. They then dispatch law enforcement, fire, and EMS to the scene to assist you at that emergency or disaster. Sometimes those individuals are taken to our local healthcare partners for additional medical care. And then when the event is over, our public works and utility departments and road departments help put everything back to the way it was before the disaster occurred. Our public health partners help us during communicable disease, air quality events, or environmental health issues that we may be having. Your elected officials ensure that the needed resources that you need from state and local governments are available to you. And then your city, tribal, and county emergency operation centers work with all of these partners to assist in resource and communication information sharing. So our community sponsors for these presentations are your Lincoln County Fire Defense Board, which is made up of each of our fire districts here in Lincoln County. Also included Oregon Department of Forestry, Lincoln County Public Health, the American Red Cross, Oregon State University Extension Service, Oregon Coast Community College for their Small Business Administration program, and the Oregon Department of Financial Regulation, their Consumer and Business Services, and of course, your Lincoln County Sheriff's Office. Our objective, strengthening your knowledge of our local wildfire risk and your role in preparedness, response, and recovery. If you've attended some of our Cascadia presentations in the past, you may recognize that objective. And that objective is the case with all hazards in Lincoln County. We do want to strengthen your knowledge about that risk, and then what you can do for preparedness, response, and recovery, as well as what your local government agencies are doing to help in those efforts. So to get us started tonight, Michael Johnson is going to join us from the American Red Cross. Michael is our government liaison and preparedness coordinator to Lincoln County specifically. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Jenny, good evening. And good evening to the rest of you. Thanks for joining. Everyone hear me okay?
Yes, I believe we can.
Okay. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us this evening, spending a little time finding out about sheltering. A lot of organizations will do sheltering, faith-based organizations. A lot of counties take that on as a county or community responsibility and just establish shelters on their own. However, the focus this evening is going to be on sheltering as it's done within the Red Cross. And as part of my presentation this evening, I will intersperse some of our lessons learned, if you will, or items that we encountered in response to the Echo Mountain fire. So next slide, please. So again, just the focus here is sheltering as it's done by the American Red Cross. Next slide, please. So the mission of the Red Cross, the American Red Cross prevents and alleviates human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. And when I say generosity of donors, I'm not just talking financial contributions, but donations of goods and you know, just a facility to be used. So the agenda this evening, we're going to talk about what is a shelter, at least as Red Cross defines it. How we, the Red Cross, prepare to do sheltering, what you can expect if you should go to a Red Cross shelter, whether you seek shelter or you just happen to, you know, stop by maybe for a meal, and how that process maybe has changed a little bit with the COVID pandemic, how you should plan and what to bring with you should you find yourself in an evacuation situation and potentially going to a shelter, and then how to find a shelter. Next slide, please. So what is a shelter? I think of a shelter as a refuge, a safe, comfortable, welcoming place. In an evacuation, there's going to be a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and when I'm talking to groups, I use a phrase, if you will, that we try to alleviate some of that stress and anxiety by keeping people warm, dry, and fed. So if you'll take a look at the slide on the lower right, that's probably typically what most of you would think about when you envision a shelter, whether it be a Red Cross shelter or any other organization's shelter. And as you'll see, cots laid out here on probably a high school gym floor or something like that. And we'll talk about some of the privacy issues or lack thereof a little later in the presentation. Just a word on sheltering. As a rule, and obviously depending on the nature of the event, the numbers might change, but as a rule, Red Cross experience is that somewhere between 10 and 20% of evacuees actually go to a Red Cross shelter. The balance either go stay with a friend, they go to a hotel, maybe the situation changes and they can return home. So next slide, please. So again, a shelter is a safe, secure place during and after a disaster where the shelter clients, to use Red Cross terminology, shelter clients can expect food and water, information. If it's a fire, where has the fire progressed? Providing the latest information. An extended power outage. What's the latest word on how long before power is restored? Those types of things. We provide health and mental health services. Jenny is going to talk later on about sheltering for medically fragile, but if an individual shows up at a shelter and maybe they've had to hurry out of their home without their medications, or maybe their eyeglasses, or somebody didn't have time to grab the walker, we will work with local providers, whether it be public health providers or maybe commercial entities, to try to get medications filled. I find some eyeglasses for somebody who had to leave theirs behind. We provide comfort and hygiene kits depending upon the nature of the event and the duration when the shelter is open. If we've got shower and extensive bathroom facilities, we'll provide toilet size soaps and deodorants and washcloths and toothpaste and those types of things. I want to say a word before we go on about pets. And I know in an earlier segment, Module 2 or Module 3, Laura Ireland from Animal Services, Animal Control, talked about sheltering with pets. And as a rule, while service animals are always welcome in a Red Cross shelter, pets per se are not. Now, that said, depending on the nature of the facility, is there a safe, clean place to maybe accommodate dogs and cats? We will be as flexible and as accommodating as we can. Some of you may be aware or perhaps experienced it firsthand with the Echo Mountain fire when we ultimately got a shelter facility established at Newport Rec Center. Fortunately, they had, I'm going to call it kind of a mini activity room, mini gym, if you will. And we were able to allow evacuees with their dogs and cats into the facility to stay there with their owners, apart from the general shelter population, and it worked out very well. In fact, the Newport Rec Center is said, in the event we had to do it again, come on down. So I just wanted to mention that in passing. We provide reunification services. If a family has been separated, maybe a husband or a wife was out shopping and the other partner was home when the evacuation order came, and they don't know where the other person might be. We will try to link them up. So within those shelters, everyone is welcome. Next slide, please. So how does the Red Cross prepare to provide sheltering for those who might need it? So the biggest thing we do is we engage with the community. Engaging with the community is engaging with people like Jenny, engaging with Newport Rec Center, Lincoln City Community Center, churches, Lincoln County School District. We identify some facilities that either Red Cross identifies, or maybe a church group or a community group comes to us and volunteers a space and says, you know, might my facility serve as a shelter should the need arise? So what we do is we conduct a kind of, I call it a pre-need facility survey, documenting the size of, let's say, a dormitory space where we could in fact lay out cots, taking a look at the bathroom facilities and the kitchen facilities and access, mobility access, wheelchairs and walkers and things like that. Are there areas where the shelter staff can do the tasks that they need to do apart from people who may be trying to sleep in a dormitory area? And is there an area where when they're not on their cots, you know, trying to catch some sleep, maybe people can hang out, play some games, read a book, what have you. We'll talk a little bit about that a little later on. So again, we engage with emergency management, we engage with the community, we implement a use agreement with the facility. Now, that use agreement basically gives us the permission gives us, the Red Cross, the permission to call the facility and say, we have a need for a shelter. Is your facility available? So it's not a commitment on the part of the church or Lincoln County School District or anything else to say, yep, I'll be there in 5 minutes to open the doors. It's just an agreement to accept a phone call. If there's, let's say, a graduation event taking place, well, you know, we go to the next facility that's on the list. When we identify the shelter facilities, our only expectation of the facility is that they provide space. We do not expect a church or school or community center to have a stock of cots and blankets and food and water. Red Cross will take care of providing all of that. Some of the other ways that we prepare, we partner with community organizations, CERT, Latter-day Saints, service missionaries were a huge help setting up the facility when we finally reached our ultimate shelter location in Newport back in September, after essentially being kind of chased, if you will, out of Lincoln City and down first to the community college and then to Newport Rec. One of the interesting things talking about community partnerships is that while many of us were still on Highway 101 trying to get from Lincoln City to Newport back in September, a group of community volunteers was already taking the initial steps to set up a shelter facility at Oregon Coast Community College. And that was a result of some of the training and the simulation exercises that we had conducted with them. Next slide, please. One of the things that I want to mention is you'll see here just again shots of different activities surrounding a shelter. Some of you may have seen up in the upper left, the disaster trailers. We do have a number of disaster trailers in Lincoln County, as well as in other areas of the state. And in those trailers, we basically have a stock primarily of just cots and blankets and some just incidental supplies with COVID. we have masks and gloves and things like that. You'll see a shot. I mentioned individuals at shelters are looking for information. You'll see a briefing going on here about maybe where a fire line is for a certain event. I do want to mention that when we do our shelter planning, what we're planning around or for is what we call a high probability, high impact event. We're not planning per se for a Cascadia type event. We're planning for the most likely events that may occur, say here in Lincoln County, a wildfire, perhaps a windstorm associated with a winter storm, something like that. So, and we also consider things like, there might be a very nice facility, but maybe the transportation routes to get evacuees in, and as well as the supplies to stock the shelter are just too congested. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about shelter operations, again, we provide food, basic daily necessities, health services, mental health services, and we utilize a lot of the resources that are donated by community partners. You'll see in the upper right here a mound of water, and we had just a huge amount of water donations with at Newport Rec Center with Echo Mountain. Next slide, please. So how has sheltering changed, or the Red Cross approach to sheltering changed with the COVID pandemic? So traditionally, sheltering is what we call congregate sheltering in essentially a big open facility, a church, a school, a community center, a dormitory type arrangement. Again, going back to the earlier slide where you saw cots just laid out row after row, buffet style meals, minimum to no privacy, and we kind of guesstimate or allow, when we're gauging the size of a facility, approximately 40 square feet per person, or per cot, if you will. And in that process, we also try to say, okay, we're going to have, maybe layout room over here for the elderly, and over on the other side of the facility, looking at putting families maybe with children over there. So those are some of the kinds of decisions, processes that we go through. With COVID, we have gone to what's called non-congregate sheltering. And again, as you're all aware, the idea was masks and social distancing. So what does that mean in Lincoln County? That means, for the most part, hotel rooms, if they're available. So hotel rooms, individual spaces for, be it, a single person, a couple, a family, maybe with a couple of children, prepackaged meals dropped at the door, significant privacy for a particular family unit. And as a last resort, early in the pandemic, we were saying, well, we'll start with congregate sheltering, and then we'll see what happens. So the expectation now is that as more and more individuals get vaccinated and travel is becoming looser and looser, more likely than not, we're going to be reverting to the congregate sheltering model, if for no other reason than, one, it's expedient, and two, there may not be the hotel rooms that available, this summer, if you will, since we're talking specifically wildfires, that were available last September. To just give you a little frame of reference, The first night at Newport Rec Center last September, we sheltered somewhere around 275 individuals and we kept that facility open for 3 days until we were able to place all the folks that needed shelter in hotel rooms. And ultimately, we had over 400 individuals in over 300 hotel rooms, and Red Cross picked up the charge for the the room charge, any pet fees if a facility imposed a fee. So with the pandemic, we were and we continue to and expect to, through this coming fire season, emphasize that the safety of our workforce and our clients is our first priority. And with that, at our shelter facilities, we will be requiring mask wearing. So next slide, please. So a new term that the process may have been around, at least in some locations, but the term has kind of been formalized and institutionalized with COVID, and that is a temporary evacuation point. Some of you may recall last September, we attempted to, on, I think it was the 9th, early in the morning, we attempted to set up a temporary, what again, we call the temporary evacuation point at Chinook Winds. And as the evacuations progressed, that didn't last very long. But a temporary evacuation point, or TEP, is a safe place for individuals who are evacuated to gather. Perhaps they can, take a breath. Perhaps they can wait a particular event out and ultimately return to their home. Maybe they ultimately have to go to a Red Cross shelter. It also allows time to develop response options. And when I say response options, I'm talking about it allows the evacuees to decide what are they going to do. Am I going to go stay with Aunt Jenny, or am I going to go to a hotel? And it also allows emergency management and the Red Cross and other community partners to assess the situation, identify if a shelter is needed, where's the best place, size-wise, transportation-wise, et cetera, to open that shelter. At a temporary evacuation point, we, the Red Cross, intend to provide water and snacks for individuals, and a rule of thumb, if you will, that we're using is that individuals might be at a TEP, in their car, kind of hanging out for, say, 2 to 4 hours, depending on the event and depending on how other alternatives progress. We are going to look at unmet needs. If somebody had to just go, and again, they left home without their meds, or maybe they are in dire need of insulin, and we will make every effort to get those needs met. One of the things that we do also is we'll try to do a registration process at the TEP, and that is twofold. Well, primarily it's to account for people. Mike is evacuated, but maybe Mike's family friends don't know where Mike is. Well, contact the Red Cross shelter and determine that Mike's already in the shelter. So we have a registration process at the TEP. Think typically large parking lot, and what we're going to be attempting to do this coming fire season is locate those TEPs at locations that are co-located or at least relatively close to a facility that could become a congregate shelter should a congregate shelter be needed. So next slide, please. So I'm going to digress just a little bit here and talk about general preparedness. So we for and before an event. As Chief Murphy said in the introduction video, when an event happens, that's not the time to start planning. Consider what are the unique needs of your household. Do you have somebody who has mobility issues? You know, is the walker quickly accessible? If you have pets, the last bullet here, when they get the knock on the door is not the time to go chase the cat down. Know where your supplies are. Have your go bags ready. If your family's separated during an event, do you have a meeting plan? And that meeting plan could be, you know, if you're, and again, we're talking broader than a home fire here, but or broader than a wildfire. But if you have a home fire, do you have a meeting plan? Maybe it's across the street. Do you have a meeting location identified outside the immediate area? Frankly, one of the issues that I personally encountered last September, talking to some individuals the night before the big evacuations really got started. We had some hotel rooms identified in Newport that were available, and we had some individuals up in the Lincoln City, Otis area who said, well, you know, I don't have the gas in my car to make it to Newport. You know, be prepared, evaluate your transportation options. So, and the last thing I'll say here before we move on is, when you're considering your plan, if an evacuation order comes, think about what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, in terms of, are you going to wait from level 1 to a level 2 to a level 3, you know, ready, set, go notice? Or maybe you're in a position where as soon as somebody knocks on the door and says, you know, there might be a situation here, maybe you're going to go then. So evaluate your options. Everybody's situation is different. Next slide, please. So again, one more digression here. Home fires, as we talk about preparedness, home fire is the event, if you will, that Red Cross responds to more than any other emergency situation. And I stick this slide in here just as a little advertising, if you will. And we're currently providing virtual home fire safety education. We will arrange to have a Red Cross volunteer contact you, and as the slide says here, talk about having a home fire escape plan, testing your smoke alarms, and some just general safety tips. We have an email address, a website, and a phone number you can call to arrange that. And hopefully, as things with COVID get a little better, maybe in a few months, some of you may be aware that Red Cross does provide free smoke alarms, and we'll arrange to send some volunteers out to install those, and hopefully we'll be back in that business before long. Next slide, please. So as we talk about preparedness, if you go to redcross.org, get help. You'll find a host of mobile applications that'll help you with preparedness. Human first aid, pet first aid, just a wealth of mobile applications that you can use as part of your planning process. Next slide, please. So back to the subject at hand, sheltering. And so as part of your general planning process. Get informed, be aware of the events that you might have to respond to, make a plan, and build a kit. So you're going to have your go bag. And if you leave home and you have no alternative, and your choice for you, your family, is to go to a Red Cross shelter, what are you going to bring with you? Well, you're going to bring your go bag. And in your go bag, you're going to have your important documents. Again, as Chief Murphy mentioned, things like birth certificates and copies of passports and other important documents. I suggest that people either have pictures, maybe take a video, have it on a flash drive of the contents of your home. If you leave and unfortunately there's no home to go back to, you've got those pictures, that video to reconstruct in your own mind for your insurance provider what you had. Be sure to bring your medications, a change of clothes. If you're throwing things in your car, maybe a blanket, a pillow. If you've got special needs, you see down on the slide here, the Similac, diapers. Be sure to provide at least a minimal supply of that to get you through a day or so. And something to keep you busy. Should you be in a shelter, you could be in there with a couple hundred of your new best friends, and you want to have something to do, games, puzzles, your e-reader, a book, that type of thing. So whatever works for you. Next slide, please. And finally, how do we find a shelter? How do we know where to go? Lincoln Alerts. The sheriff talked about that. Chief Dahlman talked about that. Local media, Lincoln Alerts. If all else fails, go to redcross.org, find a shelter, go to Oregon, pick one out. It'll provide the location. And next slide, please. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is I mentioned in my opening the mission of the Red Cross, the volunteer effort. 90% of Red Cross activity is performed by volunteers. And during the Echo Mountain fire, really all the Oregon wildfires collectively, we had over 3,700 Red Cross volunteers throughout the country involved either on the ground or virtually, doing things like arranging for meals, arranging for shelter, just a host of things. So if you can, please consider volunteering. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jenny, who's going to talk about sheltering for the medically fragile.
Yeah,
Thank
you. Thank you very much, Michael. And I'm just going to add on a few points. Many of the things that Michael talked about in his presentation, I heard many of those things referenced that we are also presenting on a full hour. So one, he talked about insurance and how to protect yourself and know what to have ready before the event, your important documents. Nancy Yule in our presentation that talks about financial preparedness, and then Mr. David Price from Oregon Coast Community College talked about business readiness. So that presentation, again, is available for you. You can look at the slides or go through the actual recorded video, and that will draw out those points that Michael referenced for your pre-preparedness efforts. Also, he pointed out things to do about animals. How do you evacuate with your pets? Laura from the animal shelter did a presentation. It's well worth your time to look at that. We did one specifically about property protection and defensible space and what that means to you for wildfire risk. What can you do now? What should you plan for the long term? We also did about emergency notifications. Thank you for referencing Lincoln Alerts, Michael. And then also evacuating when the patrol deputies do knock on your door or you actually get the call. What does that mean for a ready, set, go? How much time may you have? Did you know you can go from a level 1 kind of get ready to a level 3 and completely skip or bypass level 2? So record that, watch that video as well. And then next week, we will start off with access and functional needs planning for those persons in your households that require that extra planning, and then air quality consideration. So those are all different things that you can touch base with on that. Michael did touch on almost every single one of those. And then lastly, for the American Red Cross and all of our public safety volunteers, really consider thinking about if you're the right person, if you have time to give, you may be retired, you might still be working, but we need more public safety volunteers to be able to engage and help their community. So the only way that we can increase those public safety volunteers is by you yourself volunteering for one of those roles. If you're already a CERT member, but you have interest in the American Red Cross, you can volunteer for multiple volunteer agencies. So don't feel like if you volunteered for one already that you can't expand your training or interest by volunteering for another group. If you go to our county emergency management page, we actually have a place specifically for volunteers. You can find Michael's group with the Red Cross there, the CERT, Auxiliary Communications, Emergency Management, or our new group, Medical Reserve Corps, which I'm going to talk about in our next presentation. So next, we're going to talk about sheltering with the medically fragile person, and that's exactly what it says. A medically fragile person in our community is required to evacuate for an all-hazard event, including wildfire, flood, whatever it may be. And the Red Cross may not be able to accommodate their special needs, and that's why Public Health will establish a medical fragile person shelter. Now, we generally do try to co-locate those together where we can because it makes the most sense for families. And you may ask, what is a medical fragile shelter? Quite simply, it's a shelter for someone who may require sheltering assistance due to physical impairment, mental impairment, cognitive impairment, or sensory disabilities. It can be a standalone shelter location depending on the facility requirements, or most likely it will be co-located with other community shelters. As Michael pointed out during the Echo Mountain Fire, we had in one large room the medically fragile area at the Newport Rec Center, and then the open gymnasium area and other rooms is where the other remaining community members or evacuees were sheltered. So who coordinates the medically fragile shelter? Is it the Red Cross? Well, not really, but you know what we do get from the Red Cross is that great framework. They have been our industry partner for decades, and they have been successfully improving upon their ability to be able to provide those sheltering operations in all different types of situations and also in geographic locations. And with COVID during the last year, they were able to figure out how to shelter community members across the entire state of Oregon in that non-congregate setting. However, for medically fragile shelter, your local public health department has the primary responsibility for that coordination, but they do work in coordination with other community healthcare partners, such as our local healthcare hospitals, and then most specifically, the Medical Reserve Corps, who is their volunteer group under public health. They're the ones that will provide that base staffing to initiate the shelter and operations, but they do so under the direction of public health. So again, that's that goal. If you are a medical person, many of them have been volunteering for us through the COVID clinics, but that is the group that you want to volunteer for if you are a medical person. So who can be sheltered there at the medical fragile shelter? Anyone with that special needs, if their care extends beyond basic first aid. Again, anyone that may have any impairments or physical disabilities or may not be medically stable, but do not require acute medical care. We did have many individuals that were evacuated from our Echo Mountain Fire area that may have had full-time caregiving, but they were still able to be at their home. For those individuals, they may come immediately to the shelter where they would be evaluated. If they require more care than what can be provided there, then we'll work with our acute care hospitals and then have them transferred there or to an assisted living facility temporarily during that time that they may be evacuated. Again, who can be sheltered there? Individuals who have needs that cannot be met by a regular shelter, but do not require 24/7 support. If you are a group home or you occupy a group home, they should have a plan in place for their individual. Some of them may come to Red Cross shelters, depending on what their needs are. They could come to the medical fragile shelter, but it is not intended to be an evacuation place for facilities that manage many individuals at one time. They would be required to have their own plan to go to locations that their whole population can be cared for. Same thing with assisted living facilities. Most individuals that are assisted living facilities do require a higher level of care. They could temporarily come to a medically fragile shelter or perhaps share services with staff and facilities, but they should have their own location that they would be evacuating to. So transportation to the shelter. How will you get there? As we experienced with the Echo Mountain fire, most likely you're going to ask a friend, a family member, a neighbor to try and get you to that location. You could try a taxi service, and then what will eventually happen is public transportation services will be activated. But in the heat of the moment at a level 3, you're probably going to ride with anyone you can, and in some circumstances you may be riding with local public safety firefighters or even law enforcement if there isn't enough time to get alternate transportation in there. However, once that public transportation is established, like Michael said, we may actually have a temporary evacuation point, a large parking lot area that you caught a ride with a neighbor or a friend to that location. And then we will establish that public transportation to be able to get to the shelter. And we actually did that on the return when individuals were able to go back to their homes in Lincoln City. And as those evacuation levels were lifted, we had the Lincoln County School District, our first student bus services, and county transit were able to actually take people right back to their home locations, because we know that many community members do not have their own individual transportation, or they're environmentally friendly and they just don't have vehicles. They choose to use alternate transportation, and that's great. So a couple of ideas for you. Really encourage you to do this ahead of time. Bookmark these phone numbers and information in your phone in advance. Lincoln County Transit, they have a dial a ride program, so you can actually schedule appointments in advance if you have medical appointments, or during those times of need, you could still contact them and we could sort of arrange that in a larger scope of where they're going around and picking people up. Cascades West Ride Line, same thing. They provide that service. You can call for non-emergency ambulance transport. We had many individuals that were bedbound, so they were no longer mobile. They actually did require non-emergency transport. And then also the Lincoln County Call Center. This number 1 to put in your phone there, 265-0621. That call center will be activated by your public safety volunteers and county staff, and they will be able to quickly start referring you to other resources in case you may not have these in your phone. So what should you bring? Same things that Michael talked about. Those are the same types of things that you should bring with you to your medical fragile shelter. But more specifically, if you require oxygen, if you're on medications, diabetes equipment, if you have a CPAP machine, any of those mobile equipment that you use to kind of keep you going, you should bring those with you. Keep in mind that we will have extension cords and surge protectors and way to get all of those things plugged in. But if you're able to bring any of those things with you, that will make the process of getting you established into the shelter go that much more quickly. If you have dentures and hearing aids and glasses, if you need cane or walker for mobility and extra batteries, yep, those are all really positive things to bring. But just like Michael said, if you don't bring them on the front end, then our staff will do their best to try and augment those assistive devices that you may need. If you happen to have a service animal, food, dishes, medication, crates, making sure animals are on a leash, it may be your situation. Your animal may go with animal shelter for a short period of time, or we may be able to accommodate your service animal with you depending on the location and layout of that facility. But we really will do everything in our ability to accommodate those needs. As Michael said, entertainment items, books, making sure you have a cell phone, your charger, even a flashlight. You may choose that you want to read at way late in the night, but your next door neighbor is sleeping in the cot next to you. So you can use that flashlight to read, and any personal entertainment devices you may want. And of course, your personal items that you have for hygiene and such that will just make you much more comfortable. When I do my Cascadia presentations, I always tell folks, if you have a soft, comfortable blanket that you like and that pillow, believe me, that can make all the difference if you just have those creature comforts that you're able to bring with you. And again, thinking about those family members that we may be caring for on your behalf, what are those things? It may be a pair of pajamas that they normally sleep in that just makes them feel more comfortable. You may buy an extra set of pajamas and keep that in your go kit all the time. And also socks. An extra pair of nice clean socks can really go a long way to make someone feel comfortable. So what kind of level of care are you expecting to receive there? Basic medical assistance and monitoring is what our medical fragile clinic and staff are able to provide. They're not equipped to provide advanced medical care. So if you have someone that does require that skilled nursing care on a 24/7 basis, then we may temporarily house that person there, but we're going to transfer them to a higher level of care setting for them. And again, this is not a substitute for acute inpatient or skilled nursing healthcare. So that's basically in a gist of our medical fragile shelter, not too far unlike the regular Red Cross sheltering experience, but there are some special needs, but it is a place that you can land at right away to get yourself reassessed, figure out what your options are, and then work with our case management staff at either of those shelters to figure out what is the best option for you. So the next couple of slides here are just going to talk about some additional resources, and we're going to check our chat box as we move into the questions section. Yeah, a video here for ready.gov. As Michael and I both talked about, all hazards planning. Today we're talking about wildfire, but it could be a distant tsunami, it could be a flooding event, a long-term power outage due to a winter storm. And the ready.gov does have this short video. It's about 5 minutes long. Preparing makes sense for people with disabilities and other access and functional needs. They'll just hit home on a lot of the talking points that Michael and I have addressed here tonight. So for additional resources on our website, this is just a short list that we've gathered that we have available to you. Of course, Lincoln Alerts, if you haven't already signed up for our emergency notification systems, each person in your household should have that. That seasonal wildfire readiness information. If we do have an active wildfire in Lincoln County, we have a page that's set up and ready to go that will be posting information. Current conditions, you can click on this site and also save it on your bookmark on your phone or your iPad. Weather, tsunamis, earthquakes, fire events, air quality, all of those things are here, and it's live data that comes from a different or other monitoring sources. When to call 911 and your public safety contact information. You may have a reason to call 911, but you don't think it's an emergency. You're right, there is a non-emergency phone number that you can call if you're trying to reach law enforcement, fire, or medical. Click on that and we'll take you right to those phone numbers. And then things specific about wildfire prevention and preparedness in general from the state of Oregon, University Extension Office, Oregon Department of Forestry, Oregon Health Authority, prepare for wildfire, reducing health effects on wildfire smoke. And then state of California, they are a little bit more progressive than Oregon is, but boy, we're ramping up pretty quick, all of our state departments. But we have referenced several resources from the state of California because they've been at it a lot longer than we have. And your federal and national programs, ready.gov, the American Red Cross, those other resources are there for you as well. And again, throughout the entire presentation, click on any of the graphics or links. They will lead you to additional information to help you with your planning efforts. So we will just pause here for a second to see if we have questions. And Jessica is telling me that we do have questions. So do you want to unmute, Jessica? And I'll just let you ask the question.
Sure. So Chris asks, what role will CERT have when temporary evac sites, with temporary evac sites? And then a follow-up to that, will there be training for CERTs dealing with temporary sites?
Great. I'll let Michael take that one because we have a plan.
Yeah. Chris, I presume, since you've asked the question, that you're a CERT member, and we're going to have a CERT conversation tomorrow afternoon. You'll hear some of what I'm about to say, more of what I'm about to say at that. I think it's 3 o'clock tomorrow. But yeah, we definitely plan, we the Red Cross plan to offer some TEP training for CERT members, primarily, or one of the big reasons is recognizing that, if you will, there's a whole lot more of you than there are of us, in us being, Red Cross volunteers. So just in a nutshell, roughly what we plan to do is to have a couple of virtual 1 hour offer these a couple of times, maybe an afternoon and a Saturday morning, so we can accommodate different people's schedules. But have some virtual training of an hour, and then follow that up with, I'm going to say, a couple of hour hands-on session in a parking lot at what potentially would be a TEP location, where Jenny actually brings her emergency management trailer, and we kind of set it up, and we assess parking, and how do you bring traffic coming in, where do you have people park, people who choose to leave the TEP, where do they exit, a pet area, and so on. So I won't take any more time, but yes.
Great, thank you. And we'll have that. I think we have the dates tentatively selected, so I think we're both ready to send out that announcement and get that going. Okay, next question. Oh, that's it. That's all we have for questions. Okay, we'll just kind of pause here for 30 seconds to make sure there's anybody else that might have questions. And so I will thank Michael Johnson from the Red Cross from sharing this evening with me and going through our presentation slides and helping to communicate and educate to our public of what to expect if you are evacuated and you have to go to a shelter. And then we will also do this presentation again next week, I believe, on Monday. So if you have friends or family and you want to catch us live again to be able to ask questions of us, feel free to log in next week as an attendee, and we would be happy to do so. And it doesn't look like we have any additional questions. So we will close our presentation for this evening, and we are very thankful that a few folks joined us this evening. So that's it. Thank you from both Michael and I.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Thank you too, Jenny and Jess. Good night.